Personal construct psychology is based on personal construct theory, a theory of personality developed by George Kelly, a psychologist, in the 1950s. Kelly believed that humans acted a little bit like scientists in order to understand the world. They created mental constructs based on their experiences to inform their views and beliefs about the world. He believed that we kind of construct these ideas and they act a bit like lenses, whereby we see future, we learn information and experience things based on the previous experiences that we've had. And this can explain why two people might have a similar experience but yet use different language and have a different understanding of that. This is quite a humanistic approach in that it tries to understand the person based on how they understand themselves, rather than, say, a diagnostic approach which could use quite medical language to understand someone. Personal construct psychology is particularly relevant for educational psychologists because we work with children, young people and their families, and it's very important to understand how they construct and view the world. Especially in light of the changes to legislation in the SEN Code of Practice, psychologists have to make sure that their psychological advice is permeated with the views of the young people that we're working with. So therefore, using these approaches is particularly relevant. We're going to see a few more videos about particular personal construct psychological approaches, 3 approaches which can be used to understand and elicit the views of children and young people.
The personal construct psychology technique that I'm going to talk about is one where you draw yourself as a fish. The idea is that you encourage a child to draw themselves as a fish, including any family or friends or any objects they want to include in the background. You can then use open-ended questions to ask the child about their drawing, such as, can you tell me more about a certain part of the drawing? Or, what does this part represent for you? How come you've drawn this like this? Or, I wonder what this means to you. We need to be careful not to be judgmental and to show active listening and interest when we're asking these questions. By asking these questions, we're orientating ourselves to the client's situation in relation to their drawing. This can help us to elicit the meaning the drawing holds for the child and the thoughts and feelings that they have around the picture. I really like to use this technique when working with new children, as I think it can help me to understand them and how they view the world. And in this way, we're encouraging them to construct their reality through a drawing, which can be a really good medium to use for children that don't like to communicate very much, or children who struggle to talk about their feelings, their thoughts, or their behaviours. And that's something that I've found really beneficial. One example I have here is a drawing that I've done with a child. So the child drew this picture, first of all starting with the larger fish in the middle, which is at the front of the group, as the child felt like it was their responsibility to be a leader and a role model for their family and lead the way to ensure that they are in charge and more powerful. They then drew the family fish touching fins with their fish, as they said that family was very important to them and they wanted to keep family by their side to protect their family. They then drew the friends fish slightly smaller and further back, as they felt like friends were not as important to them as family, and they didn't trust their friends as much as they trusted their family, so wanted to keep them slightly at a distance. You'll also notice that the family fish has single striped coloured lines, the same as the fish that represents the child themselves. This is because they said they were more like their family than they were their friends, and the friends fish has lots of different coloured stripes to represent all the different types of friends that they have and how different their friends are from them. They then drew this cave, a dark cave in the corner, and these colourful reeds on the other side, as they wanted this to represent the journey that they are making from a dark past where things weren't going the way that the child has hoped, into a more positive future where they hope to have more money, a better house to live in, and to be very successful at school, in college and in future with jobs. In this way, I think it really helped me to understand this particular child, as they weren't someone that wanted to share their feelings or really talk about what was important to them. But by starting to draw the picture together, they were able to open up about what they were thinking, and actually we got to understand one another better through this process. So I think this can be a really beneficial process, and it's really visual, which is great for children, for example, children on the autism spectrum disorder, or children with other difficulties such as communication difficulties.
The ideal self technique is a technique created by Moran in 1996, and it's based upon Kelly's personal construct psychology theory of self-characterization. For the ideal self method, you firstly ask the pupil or child or person to draw the person that they definitely would not want to be. So like this. So you get them to draw that person in the middle and get them to describe that person, and you can annotate around this, checking that this is checking their answers and writing what they say. You also then ask them to draw their bag, the present that this person would want, how they are with their friends, how they are with their family, what their fear is, what their history was like, so were they always like this, and what their future would be like. After creating the image in the person of that they wouldn't want to be like, you would ask them to draw the person that they would want to be like, so the ideal self. Again, you get them to draw themselves and draw their bag and the future and the friends all around the edge. Again, listening to what they say and writing down the descriptions on there and summarising this to make sure that you have got a clear understanding of this person. You then get a piece of paper in the middle and draw a scale. You can then ask the pupil where they think they are at the moment. Are they closer to the person that they wouldn't want to be like, or are they closer to the person that they would want to be like? And you can ask them where they were previously on this scale, and maybe where they want to be by the end of the year. And you could talk about the differences between those two and how they think they might want to get from one to the other. This technique can be used to help understand a child, especially what their goals are, what they aim to be like, and how they currently feel about themselves. It can help get a picture of their current self-esteem, and what they want to do to improve. I also think it's particularly helpful for finding out maybe what their values are, and what's important to them. It's a particularly useful tool for children with ASD because it's a very visual method and it's a very structured approach. I've personally used it with two pupils who have a diagnosis of autism. I already knew them, and this was a technique that I used them, and I think having that rapport was especially helpful for doing this technique. I wasn't sure how it would go, and I wasn't sure if they'd be able to explain these people or imagine these people, but they did, and I found it really helped me to understand those children and what was important to them, maybe what they were aiming to be like by the end of the year. And I'm going to use that as motivation for them and think about what strategies they might want to put in place to help themselves to get closer to that person, so as an intervention. I think it's a very easy technique to use, which can be very child-led, and it's visual, so it's very easy to follow. One thing I found was that some of the pupils didn't want to do the drawing and they preferred for me to do more writing, so I just adapted that approach for them. I think one thing that's important when using this technique is to summarise what you think the child is saying, write this down and regularly check with them that that is what they're saying, to make sure that you've got the correct picture of what the child is saying. I also think you should give about half an hour to an hour for this technique because it could elicit a lot of conversation. So overall, I think it's a very good technique to use if you're trying to find out a child's values, about their self-esteem and how they want to be in the future, and to work out where they feel about themselves at the present moment. And also it's a very visual technique that can be very child-led as well.
So the method that I'm going to talk to you about today is a method that is underpinned by personal construct psychology, and it's called the blob tree. So I have an example of it here, and it's the way it can be used with children and young people is to ascertain their views and how they construct the world around them. So, for example, you may ask a student, which one of these blobs would you like to be? And which one of these blobs is you? And this can be used to identify their sense of identity and their sense of self. It can also be used to find out a little bit more about how they construct themselves, their world at home, and how they construct their world at school. So it's quite non-threatening, as the blobs are colourless, they are also ageless and genderless. There's also no culture that is connected to them. And this makes it easier for a child to project their feelings or their thoughts onto the paper, even adults too. So the way that I have used this technique was with a student with selective mutism in year 2. And the school is having trouble to understand why she is not talking at school, but she is talking at home. And I felt that this method we would be able to find out a little bit more about how she constructs her world at home and at school. So I asked her which blob she feels represents her home life and which blob represents herself at school. And this is what she chose. So at home, she picked this one here as her, and as you can see, she feels quite supported. And then interestingly, at school, she picked the one that was facing away. So this helped us to understand a little bit more about how she constructs her core constructs about home and school. And maybe the reason that she isn't talking in school is because she's feeling a little isolated, whereas at home, she's feeling supported. As you can see there, this blob is looking away and is not connected with the rest of the blobs. I also asked her which blob she would like to be like, and she picked this one. And therefore, it shows us that she wants to feel connected in school and she wants to have friends or a friend. And this gave us a really good indication of how she is currently feeling in school and at home, and helps myself and the teachers in the school know how to support her a bit better. For example, we are now able to put in place a circle of friends to help her feel less isolated, and the teachers can help and decide who she sits next to make sure that she feels a bit more like she belongs in class. So I feel if we hadn't done this with that student, we might not have found out really how they feel in school and at home, and what they want from school and what they want from life, really. So I found this a very useful technique.